Let's start with reports that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson may resign today. His government is on the brink of collapse after a series of scandals ultimately led to insurmountable political challenges. The boisterous British politician could just not overcome. The Prime Minister rose to power on the crest of a populist wave that led to Brexit's passing, Donald Trump's victory, and the rise of right-wing populist figures across Europe. With Johnson's collapse, Trump's post-election woes are only accelerating by the day. And with Marine Le Pen's crushing defeat in France, the rise of right-wing populism in the West may soon be limited to the confines of cable news hosts and a dwindling number of dim-witted representatives in Congress. We'll talk about that coming up. But first, let's go live right there to 10 Downing Street and NBC News senior digital reporter Alexander Smith. Alex, what more can you tell us?
Well, we're still waiting, quite frankly. The press cordon across the street from number 10 Downing Street is really starting to pack up now. Obviously, the reports are widespread that Boris Johnson does plan to resign today. Some reports saying that could come as early as about an hour's time, noon local time. Those reports are unconfirmed, but what we do know is that the Prime Minister's spokesperson has said so far that the Prime Minister is expected to make a speech today, so that is ominous in and of itself. As you say, the last few days, few weeks, few months even of British politics have really been an extraordinarily wild ride. The resignations have just been coming and coming today. Perhaps most extraordinary among the statements, Nadhim Zahawi, who just yesterday was appointed the finance minister after the previous finance minister resigned. He has now called for the Prime Minister to go. So very widespread calls for Boris Johnson to resign his post. Until now, he has been clinging on with his fingernails in defiance of seemingly most of his party. But it seems that today he may have finally realised that the game is up.
And Alex, it just became unsustainable. At last check this morning, 53 resignations from his own cabinet. There just isn't a functioning government at that point. But can you walk us through a little bit, Alex, what brought us to this day? It wasn't just these late resignations from cabinet officials, of why Boris Johnson may be compelled to step outside that famous black door behind you and resign in a short time from now.
It's an extraordinary story. Less than 3 years ago, in December 2019, Boris Johnson secured a historic election victory, swept to a landslide in the Houses of Parliament, and he was really known as a totemic figure within the Conservative Party, someone who had delivered Brexit, someone who had secured a Brexit deal with the European Union where other people had failed, and there were predictions then that he may go on to rule for 10, 15 years as this kind of talismanic figure, this force of personality. And really, it's incredible how different today's situation is from those times less than 3 years ago. And we got here by essentially 6 months of rolling scandal. Now, you mentioned at the start that the latest allegations are that Boris Johnson knew about sexual assault allegations against his Deputy Chief Whip when he appointed him and ignored the warnings about this person. But that really is just the straw that broke the camel's back. We've had a litany of scandals, including sleaze allegations, claims of bullying in other government departments, questions over who paid for the lavish wallpaper and redecoration of the Prime Minister's residence, and of course the one that viewers may be most familiar with, Partygate. And that saw Boris Johnson being the first sitting Prime Minister in the UK to be essentially accused of and charged with committing a crime by the police. He stood up in Parliament and assured fellow lawmakers that no parties happened during COVID lockdowns while the rest of the country was staying inside, keeping their distance. He stood up in Parliament, assured fellow lawmakers that no parties happened, and it turned out he was at some of the parties himself. So in terms of his credibility, this really is not a dispute about policy. It's not about what the government wants to do in the rest of the country. It's really about Boris Johnson's character, who he is as a man. And it's a through line running through not just his political career, but his life before that, which has come to this stage. And opinion polls show that most of the countries just do not trust him anymore. And it seems like his party is coming around to the same idea as well.
So, Alex, I wanted to ask you about that, his history of lying. Of course, we in America aren't quite as familiar with all the lies. We have our own former liar-in-chief to follow those lies daily. But Boris Johnson, going back to 1988, sacked by the Times for lying, making up quotes. He started writing columns for The Telegraph, caught lying and exaggerating in one column after another. Of course, one lie after another after he became British Prime Minister, lied about these COVID parties. But Brits knew that. The Conservative Party knew that, and they accepted him. They understood that's just who he was. He lied, and they wanted him in power after Brexit. I guess the question is, why are they now finally saying, enough? We're sick and tired of his lies.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that few people were under any illusions about who Boris Johnson is and was when he was elected Mayor of London, when he was elected as Prime Minister in 2019. But I think the bargain that lots of people made was that they were prepared to accept those foibles, you know, if you want to put it mildly, because of the force of personality that Boris Johnson is. He's really seen, or was seen at least, by many as a unique figure who sort of cut through to the mainstream and really broke out of the political bubble into the mainstream. He was a household name when he was Mayor of London. You know, he would do these kind of goofy things in public. We would probably remember him halfway up a zip wire waving Union Jack flags. But I guess people were always prepared to accept that he maybe had some flaws in his character because he was able to rally people around him like few other politicians could. But now that bargain has obviously tipped too far the other way, and people are starting to say, actually, that's a price that's too much, to pay, essentially, and that lies are a very charged word in British politics, and people are reluctant to use that word, but we can say at the very least that Boris Johnson has a record of saying things which either at the time were demonstrably false or turned out not to be true. And so that's where we are today, and it's really a measure of just how that thinking has changed within the Conservative Party, that they are no longer prepared to accept that bargain, and they really see Boris Johnson as more of an electoral liability than an electoral asset. And for the Conservative Party, which really has a ruthless history of gaining and hanging on to power, they really are the party of power in post-war British politics. That is the key thing here. Boris Johnson is going to cost them their seats at the next election, and that's just something they're not prepared to accept.